I'll start the meeting tonight. Actually, I'll start the meeting tonight with the mission statements. As you might recall, starting in December, we're migrating away from a CCSU vision, which is still intact, to our school-specific mission statements here. We have two of them, one for the high school and one for Center for Technology Essex. And the Essex High School is a mission-driven and learning-centered community that believes through both independent and collaborative engagement, everyone can develop excellence in their individual pursuits. We offer a rigorous and varied curriculum and believe in challenging students to think critically and act responsibly, compassionately, and respectfully. We foster intellectual curiosity and resourcefulness so that students can engage in their learning to achieve the behaviors, skills, and knowledge essential to becoming contributing members of their community and citizens of a diverse and ever-changing world. The Center for Technology Essex provides comprehensive technical programs for all students, which include career exploration, preparation, and technical literacy in a respectful learning environment. Students will have the opportunity to acquire skills necessary to reach their individual goals. I see we have no visitors in the audience tonight, so we will go forward then from our visitors to be heard and move on to our reports from the task teams. Let's start first with policy.
We're currently
Brian, go ahead. Thank you.
currently working to complete a revision of visitors to schools policy, and we are had begun the last meeting and continue our work on the revision of the wellness policy.
Okay.
No action at this time. The next one will probably come through the SU soon.
Okay.
Visitors to school.
Good. Thank you. Any questions from the board about policy?
Ryan, what was the second one? I'm sorry.
Wellness,
Wellness. Thank you.
some federal requirements having us address our wellness policy.
Good. Thank you. Next, let's talk communications. Gary, Aaron?
Yeah, we're setting up. We're going to be meeting this Friday. Aaron and I specifically, we're going to be targeting the getting out the information about the budget, how best to do that, and we're going to be working this Friday. In general, Communications Committee is still working on the framework for decision making. That's been an ongoing process. But we're kind of breaking away, Aaron and I, for our separate to push the high school CTE budgets.
Okay.
Best way to do that, Aaron.
So tomorrow night we have our regular committee meeting to finalize our discussions on the strategic communications plan. Yep. And then, as Gary mentioned, we're going to meet specifically just for this board on Friday morning with Judy and Cindy to just talk about the high school and CTE budget communications strategy.
Okay. Good.
So stay tuned.
Stay tuned. Well, it's always good to hear what's happening inside the individual task teams. And I know it's particularly for communications with budget season coming up, it's a busy time on getting the message out in a way that's easily understood, but concise enough to not to be overwhelming, because it's a fine line that has to be walked there. And thank you for your stewardship in making that happen. I'll talk two task teams. One on leaders at work. Our leaders at work task team continues to meet. We're in the we've pretty much completed our work on the superintendent's evaluation process, and right now we're in the doing reviews for board member new board member introduction and continuing education for board members. And we've had a couple of different meetings on those topics. We continue to view what training needs our board members need. How can we bring those training needs to CCSU at large, particularly amongst using carousel meetings, for example, as a venue for training, or how we do our board planning sessions for continued training. What are those requirements for increasing our competency as board members? The original focus was new board member introduction, because it is sipping water through a fire hose when you first come in as a board member. But those of us who've served on the board, even for a couple of years, there's always some refresher training that could be done. Anyway, we're looking at how to incorporate those needs and requirements into board member training, and we will be continuing that discussion again next month. I don't think we have any due-outs coming out from leaders at work at the moment on
Not
that,
just yet.
but I keep appraised that we're trying to raise the bar for everyone, so every one of us has certain standards that we can be expected to attain as board members. The other task team that I'll report on is our negotiations task team. We continue to work on our negotiations process with the Essex Junction and Westford Association. Recall that our contract expires on the 30th of June this year, and all parties are working collaboratively to come up with some ground rules, as well as some negotiation points that we can all work off of. There's been some discussion that's happened between the parties so far. There's some points that have been discussed, but nothing really more than trying to establish when our first face-to-face meetings are going to occur is what's going on there. So again, I know we had a negotiations meeting wizard come out. I don't recall what the date is for our next negotiations meeting, but I know it's sometime within the next 2 weeks is when it's going to occur. So again, I'll keep the board posted on how that's progressing. And myself and Ryan McLaren, who's not here tonight, are the U46 representatives on the negotiations committee. Okay. Am I missing anything? I mean, those are the. I don't know if there's other individual projects that need to be brought forward at this point. If not, I just want to insert a little bit of a topic. Dr. DeGuise has spent some time this past week down in Montpelier testifying, or is that the right word?
Friday,
Representing?
both, yes.
Okay. For the legislature. And Al had asked if he could make some comments about what was said and share it with the board. So, Mike, the floor is yours.
Happy to do it. Thanks for the board's interest in this. Two associations, your association, the Vermont School Board Association, and the Association of Superintendents across the state, have been working together since this summer to cooperatively produce what's being referred to as a comprehensive agenda to improve Vermont's education system. It really comes on the heels of some important work Judy's been a part of, and that is the education quality documents, and that's really the foundation of the conversation. On Tuesday, I was a part of a press conference, and Grant, I appreciate your attendance there. It was good of you to be there. The primary audience was the State Board of Education. House Education Committee members were there. Senate Ed Committee members were not able to be there. And at that point, we delivered this 5-point agenda to really try to move forward Vermont's thinking about education. It followed on the heels of the Governor's State of the State address a week earlier, and there was a fair amount of commonality in terms of the directionality of the two state associations and some of the Governor's remarks. It was a 5-point agenda. The first point was success for all students. This involves some highlighted points of not unlike kindergarten today, where kindergarten is a compulsory offering by school districts. It's not required that children attend kindergarten. It is required school districts offer it, to move down even lower, and that is to ensure equitable access statewide for children to participate in pre-K education. So preschool is a central piece of the Governor's platform, and we're there to reinforce that. Proficiency-based education for all students was another piece of the conversation, as well as ensuring it through personalized learning plans. Second point was new vision for teaching. This is about adapting working conditions for teachers to ensure that they've got supports to be creative and flexible and innovative in their work. We think there's some work that can be done on the state's teacher preparation system as well as the state's licensure system, and that there is some room to really consider making more progressive the collective bargaining framework in a 21st century mindset. The third point of the agenda was that of engaging families and communities. Certainly we know that we're not in this alone, that the most vital way perhaps to ensure that students are well connected is to be sure families are well connected to schools. And through that, we want to ensure that the Agency of Human Services is properly staffed and properly organized, because a lot of what schools are doing certainly crosses over into that body of work as well. You also probably heard a reference to some of Bob Clifford's leadership, your food service director, and that is that statewide we believe that free lunches ought to be provided to those students who qualify for reduced lunches, something you've already been doing here for some time. And we don't think that's, frankly, a very large ticket item for the state to consider, and that hungry kids don't really have reasonable opportunities to learn, and that this can be a way to really address that. Current technology was the fourth theme. This is where we think it's unfair for some communities like ours to have absolute access to broadband in our schools. In some areas of the state don't, and we know that's part of the governor's platform, that be the case by the end of 2013. And once all schools across the state have access to broadband, we then need to figure out how to ensure that families have equal access to broadband and not just available to those families who can personally afford it. We need to figure out some other ways in the future of making broadband accessibility equitably available to families. And frankly, it needs to be as ready as turning on a switch or turning on a faucet. It needs to be that accessible to everyone. We also, in Vermont, are remiss in not having a longitudinal data system. We are very much behind the times on that. And it is really stymieing in many ways our work in terms of data collection, data organization, and the use of data. And the last is about leadership. Leadership training, some ideas around that were to begin to require school board chairs and superintendents to engage in joint training so that that sense of teamwork can continue, and trainings perhaps not be held in isolation but held jointly. And also boards and administrators and teachers need reasonable and timely access to data to inform decision making in a more immediate framework. What you probably heard throughout the agenda is the distribution of work that needs to be done. A little bit of this is legislatively directed. Some of this is policy directed toward the state board. A whole lot of this, quite frankly, is directed to administrators, to teachers, and to school boards. So there is enough to do across the deck. It's been approached as a comprehensive agenda. It's one I'd like to actually engage the board in more specifically, perhaps at your next board meeting, and really have a deeper conversation about what these things can mean for us locally and to what extent we're ready to sign on. There's some conversations about whether to establish some evaluative rubrics almost for the next year to look at how the different stakeholder groups mentioned in this agenda are delivering on these points. And what's very exciting for me, having been at this for a while, this business for a while, is that we no longer seem to be arguing about the agenda. We almost seem to have agreement on the agenda. So it's no longer the what. It feels like the conversation moving to a how conversation. And it's very, very exciting to think about it in those terms. So I find it to be a very hopeful time, a very optimistic time. And that was what the press conference Tuesday was about. I was also part, as Jack mentioned, Friday, speaking to this at length with some of my colleagues and some of your colleagues from the School Boards Association to the House Education Committee as well as the Senate Education Committee on Friday for their deeper understanding and appreciation for the details of the agenda. So that's the higher order pieces of it, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to it.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Any questions? I would just like to say, Dr. DeLees, the last topic there about providing leadership, I think would be a good topic for us to discuss in Leaders at Work here. You touched on some of the themes that we're trying to address there on, board leadership and some common, rubrics that we could all measure ourselves to. So
Perfect venue for that conversation.
That would be great. That would be good. So thank you.
Thanks again.
Good.
Not a bad segue to the next item.
Yeah. Board visioning.
Yeah, I think exactly that. Those are some of the big questions, and I think there is agreement on the agenda. Surprisingly, the agenda has never appeared to be the hard thing, but it has been hard to come to. I just wanted to reground the board in what it is that we're talking about when we speak about the visioning. We had passed a motion that had said that we would begin to work on initiating a visioning and strategic planning process to engage all the stakeholders in establishing a long-range strategic direction for the high school and the Center for Technology, concluding this multi-year process with a vision of what we want to be achieving by the year 2020. So in that, our milestones that we had identified is that by the 31st of December, we would have identified a facilitator. Through the help of administration, we've identified Mary Jane Skelly, Shelley, who I think is uniquely qualified not only for her relationship with the CCSU and knowledge of it, but for having worked through a process very similar for our neighbors in Colchester. It was about a 1-year process to develop a 5-year plan and visioning for that community. We said that by the end of February that we would have budgeted adequate resources necessary to engage this facilitator and begin the effort in earnest in FY14. And we've done that with our draft budget at this point in time. Our final milestone in the motion that we passed is that by the annual meeting, April 5th, we will have prepared a full overview of the process to be presented at the district annual meeting. So that what we have now is the scoping and process defining with the consultant and the board to really nail down what it is we want to be trying to accomplish, and then leaning on that facilitator's expertise on the exact sum of the process and how that would be. So that's where we are. We seem to be on track, making good progress, and we have some lifting to do still before we get to the April meeting.
Thank you. Any questions for Brian?
Will we be scheduling a meeting, Brian?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get an early kind of collective thought meeting with just administration and Jack and myself, just to kind of get some kind of scoping, but then looking at the facilitator's idea of either a committee of the board or the board, depending upon their availability for evenings or other times. But yeah, we'll be engaging quite frequently as the process goes through.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Moving right along then, we'll go to the principals' reports. And Rob, let's start with the high school this evening.
Okay. So, you have my report that has been submitted, and then there are some updates on the report. So, first thing I'd like to cover is in terms of the update on the climate survey. The faculty will be getting the results after having a meeting with Steve Roberts and Leanne Smith, Laurie Thompson, who's taking over for Michelle Rath. We met January 17th, and we're going to have a presentation to go to the faculty on January 28th. The parents' meeting we're going to have most likely the second week in February. We're trying to coordinate auditorium availability and then communication process to get it out in a timely manner. And with students, we'll probably get additional feedback from the full faculty on the 28th, but based on the faculty members we met on, we're looking at a model where there would be a PowerPoint which would be emailed to all teachers, who would then, with a script and some prompts, go over in their 3-4 class, spending about 15 to 20 minutes based on student results, and then with follow-up opportunity for student input. But that, once again, that'll be fleshed out more on the 28th as a way to get all 3 stakeholder groups, A, the results, and B, input. Today, of course, was in-service opportunity for all staff. Science teachers worked alone. They were the only pull-out group, as it was their first opportunity to work together on the next generation science standards, and feedback at lunchtime was a lot of good work was being done, but that's all I had a chance to touch base with. The remaining staff, our Life College and Career Learning Community, organized for 3 months now a really exciting and thought-provoking business focus forum where we had over 30 businesses in. We had a breakfast for staff this morning and the businesses from 8 to 8:30. We moved into the auditorium. It was a brief presentation by myself and Martine Larocque and Bill Mayville from the Life College and Career Learning Community. We then broke up into 5 different groups and had the opportunity to go through a sequence of questions. Our group, the one I attended, we only got to one question in an hour, and that is skills that businesses would like to see and skills that they currently see that are lacking from their workforce. And to give you an idea, it was who was in my group: Lieutenant Rob Kissinger from Essex PD, Marion Lawler from IBM, Mary Powell, CEO of Green Mountain Power, and Pat Parisi from the Visiting Nurses Association. And it was, and with that, you should have the appreciation there were, bless you, 24 teachers in our group, and that was pretty much how they were broken up. And just some initial feedback in terms of what folks are seeing. Promptness, obviously, being on time, getting things done in terms of work requirements. All of the members there said don't call in sick when you're not sick. Certainly some leadership opportunities for their employees to try and build from within. They also would like to see more leadership opportunities for students. Communication, writing effectively, being able to present from an oral presentation individually and as a group or team. Collaboration. Lady from the Visiting Nurse Association, Pat Parisi, was mentioning in her opinion that she thought athletics at the high school level played an important part in terms of the leadership aspect, obviously from those that take the leadership roles, but more importantly of knowing what your role is on your team, and not everyone is the star, and the person who may or may not be the star, his or her role is very important in terms of the overall success of that group. And so she was making the statement that, in her opinion, she feels that that's a very good aspect of the school experience, is for students to experience that. And then, of course, wouldn't it be nice to have intramurals where all students would have that opportunity as a segue, building off that. But obviously, I haven't had a chance yet to get feedback from the other groups. Real positive buzz at lunchtime from faculty who attended, and really helped to open some eyes and I think make some progress in terms of what student outcomes need to be now as compared to perhaps when many of us experienced high school. After the Business Focus Forum, we had a diversity presentation by our diversity task team tied to Martin Luther King Jr. Day, in terms of basically, to succinctly summarize, treat diversity as a positive. Our differences should be viewed as such. And there was a presentation followed by a freshman student who came in and read a poem she had written for this occasion, basically summarizing her feeling on diversity. And then very quickly put together by the diversity task team, which has members from CTE as well. I'll be a fashion model to a certain degree. What every faculty member and staff member and food service employee is going to get has a T-shirt, and we are all wearing them tomorrow to start second semester. And they're obviously different colors, but there's bright pink, there's blue, there's orange, there's obviously the color I'm holding. There's also another color that I'm not remembering. But the long story short is, it's obviously going to, with all the adults wearing these very loud colored shirts with the message, it's going to prompt some communication and conversation. And basically what we want to do is make the impression that obviously our differences should be seen as a strength, not weakness or fear. So hopefully that'll help overall with adult to student conversation and further improve our climate.
Rob, for the TV audience, what was the slogan on the shirt?
Good point.
Different, fine by me.
Yep, different, question mark, fine by me.
Thank you.
Yep.
And that was a slogan that the students created?
It was that task team, which has
Yeah.
students on it as well as adults. Yes. The design was by Wendy James from the Fine Arts Department. And I guess we will certainly credit and thank the very hasty order East Coast Printers, local company, for getting the product delivered in a very nice manner. Coming off the Essex Community Safety Committee meeting January 15th, CTE and EHS will have a Clear the Halls drill this Thursday at 10:15. Also present will be Essex Police, Vermont Police, and IBM Security to help monitor, which is fairly typical. Once a year we have them come in, obviously in light of recent events. And the focus of the meeting that was on January 15th and the one in December, right after Sandy Hook, we felt it was really good to have an extra set of eyes to monitor the drill with us. So we'll have some feedback and follow-up for staff. Last but not least, the alternative physical education model credit is going to be discussed at the design team and discussed at the faculty meeting on January 28th. Then we'll have further updates, but the model seems at least structurally sound from the physical educator's perspective. We're looking to get feedback from others and see if there are other opportunities and other content areas for other standards-based measures of alternative credit. So it's not just on one content area. That is it.
Good, thank you. Any questions for Rob?
Just one.
Al?
I see a note in here that Amy Cole and you were working with Department of Ed on school improvement plan. And they had a meeting on January 18th. Any feedback from the board?
The plan we submitted, I want to say December, I don't remember the date. We met with Bruce Smith, who's our DOE coordinator, and there were 3 tasks that they wanted to see further tweaked and developed. So that was the basis for our meeting, and Amy and I will meet hopefully sometime this week and further flush out the specificity that he was looking for in terms of our plan is fine. They were just looking for some more data points in 3 areas that we had submitted.
Okay. Then we can
Yep.
chat with you about it. Okay.
Good, thank you. Any other questions for our principal of the high school? If not, thank you, Rob, and Bob Travers, our Director of Center for Technology Essex. The floor is yours.
Okay, so you have my report. Starts on 31 in your notes. Under the heading of progress made over the past month in action plan steps, there are two points of progress we've made. We recently adopted advisory team groupings. At the last staff meeting, the faculty self-selected one of 6 different advisory teams that will serve to better inform for collaborative decision-making. You see on page 33 the headings of the teams are creating a successful model for academic integration and effective student transitioning planning, application and enrollment at CTE, increased collaboration with Essex High School and local middle and elementary schools and community partners, student recruitment and outreach, college and career planning, and expanding student leadership opportunities. On that list, you'll see how the faculty have started to define what those are, and I see Dr. Deweese counting 6, and the note said 7. The one that I dropped off the list by accident is health and wellness of students. If you look at the bullets, you'll see some of the things on the lists come from our student survey a couple of weeks ago, and some of them are just ongoing initiatives. The second point of interest that we've made progress on is in the area of enriching campus experience for students. The Student Council has decided to call 2 presenters to do 2 different CTE-focused all-school meetings. One will be done by Kevin Brooks and the other one Colin Ryan. These are presenters that the Student Council chose themselves. One is to focus on the impact people's lives by showing how quickly life can change. Kevin Brooks will deal with topics of road safety, speed and dangerous driving, and peer driving. And Colin Ryan, A Stand Up Life, is focusing on anti-bullying messages. For our implications and finding on recently reviewed data sources, the student council and select administrators have decided on January 30th to pull together the CTE Climate Survey Action Group. It will include all of the student council members, who are also being asked to invite friends who aren't on student council to review the climate survey data. This is in preparation for that group to host a parent group. That parent group will happen in the third week in February. Public events over the next month. CTE is doing open house on February 9th. Communications, we just started our admissions and recruiting TV commercial launch. We have 2 new TV commercials. They're excellent, I think.
I happened to see one last night in the football game, wondering how we could have afforded to put a CTE commercial on during the AFC Championship game.
I think you saw one, right?
I saw one, that's right.
All the rest are in the morning.
I did see one last, and it was an excellent commercial, by the way.
So
I
we
was very
recycle
impressed.
about 3 or 4 from past years, and we always choose to do 1 or 2 new ones. The 1 or 2 new ones are the ones that say, "I am CTE student" at the end, where they look up and into the camera. Both of the one for graphic design featured graduates. I am a CTE graduate, and the ones at dental
Right.
are current students. So I think they're great commercials.
Yes.
Something I'd like the board to know, well, 2 things. January 17th kicks off our Skills USA State Conference and Competition. We'll be doing 100 competitions inside this building with our students to qualify them for state competitions. The next level will be state competitions, where students will compete with all local area tech centers, and from that we find out who are the state champions who go on to Kansas City, Missouri. The other thing I'd like to share with you is something that came through last week. I don't know if you saw the Burlington Free Press on January 14th, but one of our students, Dino Dezinich, was named an academic all-star from Winooski High School. Dino's been with us for 2 years. Last year he was in the professional foods program, and this year he selected from health informatics. He's a great young man. Dino is planning on going to UVM in the School of Nursing, and he has larger plans to complete his physician's assistant master's degree from Springfield College. And one of the top 5 accomplishments he listed was jump-starting his career at the Center for Technology Essex. So if you didn't see it, I wanted you to have that in your hands. It's a feather in our cap, and as well as obviously Dino's cap.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
And Bob, you've got a pre-Valentine's Day outing opportunity for board members on Saturday, February 9th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m., and
That's
that's
right.
the open house. And
That's right.
I would really encourage board members who are free that day to stop in. It's really going to be worth your time.
I also wanted to remind you, this is the first year that we're going to try the outreach to middle schoolers on that day. So we have 4 different events for smaller groups of middle schoolers to come in and do experientials with us, trying to get them to understand what their career options or school options might be down the road.
And to our viewing public, it's open to them as well. So Saturday, February 9th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for our CTE director?
Jack, I just had a question. I guess it's for both, but the information that we got about the security review that was done. I noticed that there were some recommendations in there from the reviewers or the evaluators, and I just wondered, what we're doing to kind of address some of the suggestions that we made. I noticed that one was just some concerns about students going on and off campus. I just wondered about, or are we having a separate discussion on that?
If you look on our agenda, we have a dialogue night on community safety at 7:15.
I jumped
So
ahead, I'm
I
sorry.
absolutely want to address that question, but if we could do it there, if that's okay, Aaron, we can come back and touch.
I'll save it.
Okay, great, thank
Sorry
you.
about that.
Okay. Any other questions for CTE or EHS for that matter? I'm gonna go off topic a little bit here and ask our Associate Superintendent Judy DeNova to brief the board real quick on an initiative that was going on. I sat in on a presentation last week that was sponsored by the Heart and Soul of Essex on a project that affects not just U46, but all of CTE schools. And Judy, maybe you can expound on that a little bit on what's going on.
Sure. Many of you know the Heart and Soul organization in this community has been working with neighborhood conversations and trying to understand what the values are in Essex. So they're acquiring these words that people can associate with their values of the system. One of the opportunities that Lisa Foley, who's a fourth and fifth grade teacher at Fleming School, an art teacher, and she's also the K-3 art teacher at Summit Street School, once worked with an artist named Kevin Reese, and he is inspired by Calder's work in making mobiles, and has a artist in residence opportunity called Mobilizing Our Community, where the students will capture those value words from Heart and Soul, and they'll be inspired to create these mobiles that will, if you've had a chance to see any of his work, there are these huge mobiles that students create pieces to and string together then. He'll be here the week of November 18th through the 22nd, and during that period of time we'll be working with students at Fleming School, ADL, EHS, and EMS, so that there's a good mixture of our schools, because EHS is seen as often stated now as the Switzerland of the
Our
schools.
community, right.
Yes, a common ground. So much of the work will happen here at EHS, and students will come here. Kevin was extremely impressed with your Fab Lab and the equipment within it, and hopes to utilize the physics and the mathematics of making mobiles, and they will be on display in the cafeteria for a short period of time, and then businesses that have made contributions to this effort will be identified, and they will receive mobiles for their different businesses. So he toured the 4 schools I mentioned, and then spent a couple days visiting businesses and looking at places for installations, and as Jack mentioned, did a presentation at the Darkroom Gallery to show people's work. So we're really energized and excited. It's quite costly, and Heart and Soul has been very generous in making contributions, and EHS, Mr. Reardon spoke about the Life College and Career opportunity today. Mary Beth Pirelli, the learning community leader, met Kevin and volunteered to have flyers put into the bags that were made for the employers. So there'll be a lot of publicity in the coming weeks and months. Oftentimes we don't have this length of time for planning, so it'll be really nice for the students to capture the sentiment of values within the community of Essex, and then in turn leave behind a piece of art that'll be something that they won't just make a piece of the mobile. There's like this 7-phase process to creating it, so that it'll be a real collaborative effort in making these mobiles, and a really exciting opportunity. So stay tuned, and we'll keep you briefed. We'll send you his website so you can get an idea of what these works of art are going to look like. Thank you, Jack.
Good, thank you, Judy. Okay, now we'll move on to the item, Dr. DeWeese, on the dialogue night for community safety, one of the themes that Aaron just raised here. And so I'll turn the floor over to you.
Some planning's going underway right now. I'll turn it over to Judy to brief us on it.
It's good to be the associate. This event that's being planned is scheduled now, Tuesday, February 19th. So please put that into your calendars as soon as possible. It is being sponsored by the Public Safety Committee, and the Public Safety Committee has been in existence since 1995. Hard to believe. It's been many, many, many years. Mike and I estimated they've met over 150 times during that period of time. And the composition of that committee are school principals, counselors, firefighters, first responders, police, Essex PD.
Nurses?
Nurses. Am I missing anyone else? Rob's a frequent person in
State police.
attendance.
IBM is often there. Security.
IBM and the state police. And one of the recommendations that people first and foremost think of when they think of safety is to have that kind of public safety committee that meets regularly and has over many years now established really strong relationships where they call each other frequently. A safety manual was designed and developed, and this manual is that Mr. Reardon
Carries it with him all the
Vanna
time.
down on the left is displaying now.
Gives me good traction in the winter. No, it's very good, very good document.
We also have it posted online for easy access, and that book is full of drills that we conduct routinely monthly and calibrate on. And they want to be sponsoring an opportunity for this to not be a forum as much as a dialogue. So we can talk about community safety, we can talk about school safety, and we can talk about legislative work in this area. So what may be of particular interest for this board is Brian mentioned that Mary Jane Shelley is going to be working with you. She will be the facilitator that night, so you'll have an opportunity also to meet her and see some of her facilitation skills at work. Mike and I.
What time and
The details of the time.
Should be clear later this week.
okay.
Location will likely be here
Yeah.
in Switzerland.
And I think it'll be an evening of listening and having some resources available for the community to get information. And hopefully there'll be, I know Cindy's working with us for a communication plan. And we'll have an opportunity to take the pulse of our community. So
The Community Justice Center may be interested in sponsoring the web presence for this event as well, including follow-up answers to questions that may surface that evening. So there can be a real communication theme continuing after that evening.
we've been working really closely with Mark Andrews, Superintendent of Essex Schools. This is an opportunity, again, to show the collaborative efforts that are happening between and among not only the first responders but school personnel. They have had, Essex Schools have had EPD come in and observe their drills and meet with their leadership team. EPD will be meeting with our leadership team on Wednesday, so we're going to stay in close collaboration with any changes that are happening in Essex Town around our drills, and continuing the dialogue of how we stay safe in our community. and our schools.
It should also be noted that school administrators are encouraged when they can to participate and observe others. I know I participated in one at Essex Elementary School and at Fleming School in the last 3 years.
I did want to ask, Judy, have there been any audits, independent assessments or audits done by external security people, personnel?
Of the drills?
Of the various schools in the district, outside of high school?
The high schools.
Attachment 3 in your materials speaks to a significant one that occurred in '08.
That's the only one.
It's the most recent comprehensive one, yes.
Mhm.
But the Community Safety Committee, that really is its mission, is currency of
Yeah.
protocols, operations, planning.
I know from my own personal experience being involved in that one that I learned a lot more by having an external, someone not familiar with our area, because each of us have blinders because we're
Yep.
all here in it. And that was a very valuable process for our board and for the administration, like going that route. It wasn't a lot of money either. It was well thought out, and I think they spent a lot of time on that report.
We appreciate the board's support with that effort.
I think that was just kind of what I was asking also was, you know, I know that the last formal audit, it appears, was in 2008, so I guess I just was wondering if we had kind of
An update
like
on
a
progress to
formalized,
date.
right, or, you know, if there is some discussion about having like an external audit done again. I have no idea how often these are normally done out, you know, I'm kind of just asking the question, I guess, but,
It's rare to have them done, so we're proud to have undertaken this
okay,
Yeah.
effort.
okay.
And I will say, the effort that we did 2008, so
Mhm.
4 or 5 years ago, you know, it was not a it was not a reaction to some outside circumstance that forced us to look at.
It was
and so it was
proactive.
we were
Right.
proactive, not
Which is great.
reactive. Okay.
Right, we
And-
wanna
and-
continue that,
and-
right.
And we want to continue
Mhm.
that, which is going. You know, part of what the community self-assessment is
Mhm.
is part of that process. Is being what are our community standards and values and resources that are available to look at a
Mhm.
broader spectrum of safety.
Mhm.
Now, there may be specifics that the board may want to get into a detail on that I would suggest we bring those specifics that the board is interested in forward to administration to allow administration time to work on that. We can continue that dialogue.
Mhm.
But I want, in the context of what's going on a broader community plan, I think that it's being proactive, not reactive. It's engaging a large, not just insular, inside of the school community, but other schools, outside organizations, first responders, not that this is unique for U46, because Essex Town is a key constituent of us, but that large community, IBM, as Rob had said, that having that discussion helps remove some of those blinders that we have, you know. So I'm glad to hear that initiative is going on, and we look forward to hearing more on how that's progressing.
And the Clear the Halls drill that you're doing on Thursday, right, Rob?
Mhm.
So that you said that, like, you know, there's gonna be some state police there, and
Mhm.
so I'm assuming that they'll give feedback.
Yeah, typically we debrief after that drill. CT administrators, high school administrators, and in this case, you know, if everybody shows, which they're intending to, we'd have IBM input, state police input, and local PD input.
That's great.
So-
I mean, I'd love to hear
Okay.
the feedback. I mean, I'm sure you'll update us, but
Yep.
it's great.
So just to reiterate for board members and RETN audience, you know, that's Tuesday, February 19th, right?
Correct.
And where is that going to occur? Is it
Switzerland.
in Switzerland?
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise known
I
as
haven't
EHS.
quite nailed down the space yet. I
Okay.
mean, we're having a meeting on Wednesday, following our leadership team meeting to
Okay.
determine some of those possibilities.
When did we go to the closed campus?
Following that report.
Following.
Yeah, it was.
Because
whatever.
I
It is an
right,
Three
outcome.
years.
because I mean, if we really that was one of their big recommendations, and we acted on it. So I
Right.
think that
Yeah.
that was really,
Right.
that was a fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for that discussion, everyone. Let's move on to our next topic, which is our FY14 budget approval. Grant will be here running through the good work that administration and the board has done over the past several weeks. It's nice to see this kind of come through for an action item for tonight for the board to take, as to put something on a board action for a budget approval to take forward for the vote in April. So, Grant, without further ado.
All right, I'll run through the briefing. This briefing reflects the proposed budgets after 4 board work sessions. And just a note to the public, all the briefings are posted on the U46 webpage, which is accessible at ccsuvt.org. So we started with the board's guidance, which was to maintain the high level of educational quality, to support the school action plan, and on the high school side, to be sensitive to the burden on taxpayers by having a minimal increase to education spending. On the tech center side, to be sensitive to the burden on taxpayers by submitting a budget with minimal increase to tuition. And just kind of to start out with a summary of what you're going to see, the high school general fund budget is $23 million. It represents an increase of about $400,000, which is 1.8% increase, which is very reasonable. Education spending is increasing 4.4%, or $723,000. That's lower than the governor's estimate for statewide education spending increase. Increased health rates and a decreased fund balance had a big impact on educational spending and created a big challenge. The capital plan is less than 1% of the general fund budget, about $228,000, which you'll see later. The CTE budget is under $8.5 million, an increase of only $7,000, less than 1/10%. But the tuition will increase about $700, which is 4.6% higher. Once again, we kind of benchmarked the statewide average education spending increase of 4.8, so 4.6 was, we were trying to get up to 4.8 and did. The decreased 6-semester average had a large impact on tuition because it represents a loss of revenues. And we'll go through the general fund for the high school. Quite a bit of challenges, as the board is aware. The 2-vote provision, we exceeded the 2-vote threshold by $228,000, which is just under 1% of the budget. The 3 main reasons that we exceeded the 2-vote provision were: 1, you were one of the few districts that met the challenge for change in FY12, so you were benchmarked against a much lower education spending level than most districts out there. Education spending, as we mentioned, is up 4.4 from this year, but it's only up 3.9% from FY11 prior to the challenge for change, which means over that 3-year span, our education spending has only increased 1.3% per year, which is very impressive. A second main reason is that, as you know, we have a significant increase in health insurance rates. Right now we're using 13%, which is a $294,000 impact. If that, for example, was just a 3% increase, which is more typical, then we would have been under the threshold just with that impact alone. Another main reason is that this is the year following a large fund balance, and a decrease in fund balance is just as costly as an increase in investments. Some of the other budget challenges: Education Jobs Fund revenue expired in FY13. We did have some staffing adjustments based on student needs. We increased our 6-semester average for tech students increased a bit, and the tech tuition is a bit higher. The SU assessment is up a bit from this year. Some tax rate challenges. We have a decrease in equalized pupils again, and the base tax rate is slated to increase by 3 cents. It wasn't all bad news. Some favorable conditions. We had the voters approve a committed fund balance of $115,000 last year, which is available for us this year. PE staffing, we were able to decrease that for FY14 at about the same level as the drop in Education Jobs Fund revenue. We have more special education excess cost revenue from sending schools that we're anticipating. We have decreased special education tuition costs, and we paid off the lease for telephone equipment this year, so that cost is down. A neutral change is that we've realigned most of the special education contracted services to the SU, and along with that, some federal revenue. So that's a net zero. It's a decrease in costs and a decrease in revenues. Some achievements to talk about for the high school. From a student perspective, we were ranked the number 2 high school in Vermont by U.S. News and World Report. The most recent Agency of Education data shows that we have the highest percentage of students who enroll in an institution of higher education. That's backed up by a recent post-high school plans survey that shows that over 90% of our students plan to attend a 2 or 4 year college. We have 8 National Merit Scholarship competition semifinalists. From the teacher's perspective, we have a teacher that's providing an AP statistics course that awards dual credit with UVM. We have a teacher who was selected as a Roland Foundation Fellow and is developing partnerships with schools in Vermont and abroad to bring digital learning to our schools. Charlie Burnett was named UVM Teacher of the Year. Our school, several achievements. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but just some of them. The STEM Academy enters its 2nd year, and as Judy mentioned, we have a great Fab Lab that opened in September of this year. AVPA is entering its 4th year. We have a high number of advanced placement course offerings, enrollments, and tests. We have increased student enrollment in online courses. We were named one of Vermont's innovative schools. And we just went through a New England Association of Schools and Colleges review this year, and we're awaiting the final report. And you can see we've also done some presentations in the region. Looking at some testing results, reading, math, and writing. This is last year's data. We're going to get the latest data probably in maybe a month or two.
Mid-February.
Late February. Science is FY12 data. But as you can see on this chart, we exceeded the state average anywhere from 9 to 17% in the various areas. And we exceeded the county average in every area with the exception of writing, where we were about 3% below the county results. But in the other areas, you can see science 9% higher than Chittenden County, math 7%, reading 6%. So some pretty good results, and hopefully this year's results will be even better. Enrollment projections. The FY14 projection shows a drop of about 35 students. The negative trend for tuition students has slowed greatly, as you can see. We had drops from 248 to 223 to 216, and then it slowed off to 211, 208, and we actually project a slight increase next year. And that's due in large part to providing buses to the islands in Georgia. Overall, we expect to drop for a few years slightly, but level off in the 1250 to 1260 range. And maybe in the distant future, like FY23, we might actually start seeing a bit of an increase. One thing to note is the impact of statewide school choice is not factored into this because this is going to be a new data point for us. We do know that it can't be more than 20 since the board limited the inbound number of school choice students to 20. And the budget overview slide. The amount that voters will see to approve is about $23.3 million. It will be split because of the two-vote provision. The first part of the article will be about $23 million. The second part will be $228,000. As you can see by the chart, the expense budget only went up 1.8%. Ed spending 4.4%, which is under the governor's estimate. The bottom near the center, you can see that figure 162.3%. That is the district's spending adjustment, and that is a key factor in tax rate calculation and will show up in later charts. To show kind of where the revenue comes from for the general fund budget, most of the money comes from state education spending grant, special ed grants, on tech on behalf tuition, and of course the education spending grant includes tax revenues. We do get about 18% of our funds through local revenues, and a large piece of that is from tuition from sending schools. We don't get much federal revenues. It's less than 1%. It used to be a little bit more than that because we had some Idea B money for special ed contracted services, which is no longer part of your budget. Other revenues, just a very small amount of money there. We used to have a little bit more. Medicaid paid for social workers, which once again is not part of your budget anymore. Some of the significant changes in revenues. Fund balance, as I mentioned earlier, is down about $153,000. We should be glad that there's any kind of surplus at all to roll forward as a revenue. The fact that it's down a little bit is unfortunate. But to try to make up for some of that loss, we have used about $65,000 of the committed fund balance. There's still $50,000 that we could have tapped into, but if we did that, then we set ourselves up for the potential to have a large decrease in fund balance again in FY15, which we'd like to avoid. Regular education tuition is up about $35,000. We have a similar number of students, but the tuition student count is projected to be up a little bit, and we're increasing the tuition rate for the high school. Special ed revenues is up based on anticipated services for students that are coming from sending schools. The education spending grant balances our revenues with our investments, and as the note says, an increase in this line generally equates to a higher tax rate. State special ed revenues are down about $180,000, but this aligns with lower outside placement costs or special ed tuition, which you'll see later. The state's portion of tech center tuition is up about $22,000 because we have a slightly higher 6-semester average and the rate was inflated. You'll see that there's a matching investment increase too, because the state's portion shows up as a revenue and as an expense. Idea B is down $163,000 because we've realigned those contracted services to the SU. The same holds true for Medicaid reimbursements, and that's the cost of social workers that's now in the SU. Education Jobs Fund, as I mentioned before, was a temporary appropriation that expired. This shows you how the investments are broken out. About 72% of the money is spent on salaries and benefits. The largest benefit is health insurance. You'll see there's a lot of must-pay requirements in the rest of this chart, such as special ed tuition, tech tuition, debt service. After you back all those things out, you're really left with about 5%, which is money that we can spend on salaries, equipment, routine maintenance, travel, professional development, books, copiers, all of those types of things. Really, just 5% of the budget is going toward those requirements. This bar chart shows investment changes from the FY13 budget to the FY14 budget. And as you can see, the largest increase is in the area of salaries. But it's a 2.7% increase, and that includes staffing adjustments. So without staffing adjustments, it'd be even lower than that. Benefits is a large increase because of the 13% increase in health rates. Special ed tuition and professional services is down about 200,000. That's because tuition is down about 195,000 based on student need, and 200,000 was realigned to the SU for contracted service. As I mentioned, the revenue went with those costs. The SU assessment is a bit higher because the SU, like U46, experienced a lower fund balance for revenue. We realigned bus aids from Essex Junction into the SU, and we added more time for the web manager. Debt service is down because we have lower interest each year, and we applied some of the state construction aid. The other category talks about international exchange, student internships, and musical instruments, and that will be discussed in a future slide. So here are the significant changes that add to the total budget increase of $400,000. Salary and benefits obviously is the largest area. Salaries and benefits make up over 70% of the budget, as I mentioned, which means that we spend a lot of time reviewing staffing, and we look at enrollment projections, class size standards, and registration history to determine the appropriate full-time equivalent requirements. The salary increase is about 2.7. It would be 2.4 without staffing adjustments, and there's a slide in a few seconds that will show you those staffing adjustments, and there's a considerable number of them, both increases and decreases. The benefit increase is pretty much all health rate increase. Health rate increase accounts for about $294,000 of increase. You can see the total benefit increase is only $300,000. Tech tuition, the state portion is up $22,000. You saw earlier the revenues were up $22,000. The local portion is up about $46,000. And this is the tech tuition that pays for Essex Junction and Essex Town students that attend tech centers. As the note says, most of those kids are going to CTE, but not all of them. Some go to Burlington Tech. The high school 6-semester average increased a little bit, and the rate went up, and the tuition went up as well. Special education investment, you can see that's down almost $400,000. As I mentioned before, that's a decrease based on outside placement costs going down and contracted services being realigned. The school choice agreement that's on here that shows an increase of $26,000, that's not statewide school choice. This is the existing school choice agreement that we have with South Burlington. This agreement stipulates that we pay for tuition in arrears, meaning that in FY14 we'll be paying for the kids that are going there this year. And this year we have more kids going than kids coming in. So this $26,000 represents the net amount of money that needs to be paid next year, and it is the final year that we'll be doing that because of statewide school choice. The SU assessment is going up about $90,000. A big chunk of that is because bus aides, instead of being Essex Junction employees, are now in the SU. So instead of paying a shared service, it's showing up in your SU assessment line. As I mentioned, web manager hours are increasing, and the SU had a lower fund balance, which required a higher amount of assessment. Life College and Career Student Internships. This is tied to the school action plan. It's an increase of $15,000. It's to increase the opportunity for internships. It's also been referenced recently by the governor as a need for the state. The Roland Virtual International Exchange Project. I mentioned earlier that we have a Roland Foundation Fellow. This money is to realize a project to create a virtual campus with a French-speaking school along with other Vermont schools so that parents, students, and teachers can participate in cultural exchange. Fine arts equipment, this is for an instrument replacement plan, and it aligns our instrumental music program with high schools in the region. Athletics is up about $16,000, and there are several areas driving that. One significant one is a replacement golf cart to transport injured athletes. We also have increases for entry fees, uniforms, officials fees, because there are more times whenever we need to bring in 3 officials instead of 2. And then the last page showing increases or significant increases or decreases. The first one is a decrease. We paid off the equipment lease for telephones, so that line is going down about $41,000. Student transportation, the cost is mostly for athletics and transportation for tuition students, but this increase is more driven by special education and homeless transportation needs. Debt service is down about $55,000. Most of this cost relates to the One Campus project, and the interest portion drops each year. And the fine print on this chart shows the staffing adjustments that we laid in for this budget. I probably won't touch on every one, but I'll try to get most of them. The top line is the Alternative Center for Education. There's a small increase there because we have a waiting list for that program. There's a small increase for community internships to increase that opportunity, which is also associated with the school action plan. There's a line for English language learners. We have an increasing population in that area. That position actually exists now, but it wasn't in the FY13 budget, so it's a budget-to-budget increase. The interventionist is associated with further down a reduction in the area of a mainstream TA. What's happening here is based on student needs. We have a higher level of need to accommodate, which means we need an interventionist versus a TA. So it's just a higher rate basically, and those two are offsetting entries pretty much. The areas of the math and STEM seminar, the reductions in art, French, PE, science, and theater, that's all based on enrollment projections, class size standards, and registration history. The note at the bottom just is kind of a key. That third column is titled Object. Those are object codes or accounting codes. Object 110 just basically means those are teachers. And if you add up all the adjustments for teachers, you'll see it's a net reduction of just over 1 full-time equivalent. 111 is for support staff. That increase of 1.84 is basically your ELL tutor and a portion of computer technicians that we need to bring on because of increased number of computers. 112 is stipends for coaches and advisors. 114 is stipends for new teacher mentors. That used to be paid for out of the teacher apprentice program. They cannot afford that now, so it's back in your budget. In security, this is not an area of a significant increase, but it has always been an area where we had a significant investment. And I just wanted to remind everybody that even though there's not a big increase here, this is an area that we've spent a lot of time talking about, and we've invested a lot in security. To begin with, you have $220,000 in salaries and benefits, and you can see there's 2 full-time full-year positions, 1 full-time school-year position, 2 part-time school-year positions, and 1 part-time weekend position. The capital plan that you'll see later has $8,500 for computer system replacement equipment or other needs. The operating budget is just under $15,000 for supplies, equipment maintenance, and monitoring the fire and security alarms. Infrastructure, you have a very sophisticated camera system with online monitoring and 45 cameras, some of which are pan, tilt, zoom cameras. You have panic button locks for the main entrances. Classroom doors have locks on them, and the windows have blinds or coverings. You have an anonymous tip line that's been established. Some things that aren't on here, you have 2-way radios for communication. And the SU budget has an Alert Now emergency notification system. In the miscellaneous area, you have administrators, including Rob, attend monthly school public safety meetings, which we talked about earlier today. You have monthly safety drills, which we also talked about earlier, that are at times observed by the Essex PD. We have a detailed crisis action plan, which was our crisis guide, which has been tailored for us, by us. And we also have a very detailed evacuation plan. So those just are some examples of investments that we have had and continue to have. Now getting into some of the calculations, that top chart you saw earlier titled a budget overview, and I mentioned that we'd be getting back to that number of 162.3% district spending adjustment. The bottom chart shows tax rate calculation. You start with a base tax rate, which in this case has gone up from 89 cents to 92 cents. You multiply that by that district spending adjustment. Then you multiply that by the percentage of kids in each community that actually attend high school. And that's where the tax rate starts differing between communities. Once you have that, you divide it by the common level of appraisal from each community. And you'll see that Essex Junction is highlighted at 100% because the CLA actually came in at 99.65, but it's being appealed, and we anticipate that it's going to be higher than 100%. But for now, I'm just using 100%. So hopefully that resulting tax rate of 51 cents for Essex Junction is, a worst case scenario. Essex Town calculates out to be about 52 cents. For income sensitivity, once again, you start with the overview slide that shows the district spending adjustment. You multiply that by the base rate, which for income sensitivity is 1.8%. Multiply that by the percentage of kids in each community that are high school age, and you get a 0.99% for Essex Junction, a 1.03% for Essex Town. This slide just shows you kind of the implication of those rates. For Essex Junction, the homestead tax rate results in about a $37 or $38 increase for every 100,000 in property. But as I mentioned, hopefully that CLA will go up, which will bring that impact down. Income sensitivity is a $15 impact for a $50,000 salary. Essex Town, $25 for every 100,000 in property, and $10 for a $50,000 salary. And just as a reminder, most people don't pay purely based on property or purely based on salary. It's a combination of the two. And those tax grids that you'll see, hopefully in time for your annual meeting and in the annual report, will allow you to look at your salary and your property value and estimate what your taxes will be. Now this two-vote thing that I've been talking about, it's Act 82. It's a mandated, it's legislative language that requires that you ask yourself two questions. The answer to both has to be yes in order for you to have a two-vote article. The first question is, did our prior year ed spending per pupil exceed the state average? The answer to that historically is yes for us, because this community has been willing to invest more than the average Vermont school. The second question is, does the proposed education spending exceed what's called the maximum inflation amount? That maximum inflation amount is looking at our prior year ed spending and inflating it by using the state average and adding 3.2%. So when you do that math, our education spending is about 17.1. The district maximum inflation amount is about 16.9. The difference is about $228,000 that we're over by. Because of that, we have to use this language for the budget articles. And I won't read it to you, but it's in the law. This is the language you have to use. The article, the overarching article, is going to talk about the total budget. Part A is the amount that you're under the threshold by. Part B is the amount that you're over the threshold by. Another way to look at it is that Part A, in your case, equals the general fund budget. Part B equals your capital fund budget. And the voters are used to seeing two articles, one for general, one for capital, but the language has been different. So this is the language they'll see this year. This will be the only year that they see it because Act 82 sunsets this year. So to summarize the high school general fund, we talked a lot about 2-vote. Remaining below that threshold is very difficult, especially for districts that met the challenges for change, which you did, and not many did. Education spending increased only 3.9% since before challenges for change, 1.3% per year. So even though it's 4.4 from 13 to 14, your track record over the long haul has been very good. You're over the threshold by $228,000, which is less than the impact of the health insurance rate increase. We did work a lot at trying to reduce education spending to the extent possible without impacting quality, educational quality, reducing any programs, or setting us up for problems in FY15. The overall budget increase is $400,000, which is only 1.8%. The estimated tax rate increase, as I mentioned before, is about $25 to $37. 37, hopefully a worst case scenario, assuming we get a higher CLA for Essex Junction. And just looking at the impact, if we didn't have that 3-cent base rate increase, instead of 25 to 38, it would be $8 to $21. So that's another big piece of the equation for the tax rates. Now, moving into the capital plan, we're focused on FY14. The total capital plan adds to 228. That's usually limited to 1% of the general fund budget. In this case, it's a little less because we were trying to come up with the exact amount that we were over the threshold. Safety and security is about $8,500, and I mentioned that a little earlier. Bathroom improvements for handicap accessibility is $25,000. We've done several of these, and as you've seen, they come out great. A big improvement. The two that we're going to do next year are the ones that are near the junior ROTC area that are in really rough shape. We're putting in for a replacement vehicle. We have a 1998 salt truck that's in real rough shape. Kitchen renovation, we put about $25,000 toward that. We initially were just looking at trying to fix the flooring. But really, what we're looking at now is redesigning the entire layout, and we're setting aside money to be able to look at that, to design it, and then to be able to have some decent amount of money to put toward that project should we decide to move forward. Heat plant maintenance, that's for significant heat plant maintenance like heat pumps and replacing and repairing boiler doors, those kinds of things. That's about $20,000. Information technology is the infrastructure requirements, about $50,000, and that's mostly for switches. Science and technology lab, that's the fab lab, additional work we need to do there to install a drop ceiling and refinish the floor and put in some sound dampening. And the baseball field, about $40,000, that's lowering and leveling the infield, installing drainage and sprinkler heads and realigning the bases. There's some out-year requirements that we'd like to do, like bullpens and batting cages, but that's not in FY14. And then entering the home stretch here, CTE. We had some considerations in that budget as well. Those considerations were largely based on the decrease in 6-semester average, which equated to about $300,000 in lost revenues. CTE also had to deal with that large increase in health insurance rates. They had a bit of an increase in shared service and SU assessments like the high school did. Favorable conditions were that they paid 2 out of the 3 early departure incentives. Eliminating the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps program saves about $100,000, which is a big help. Decreasing debt service costs was helpful, and the fact that we paid off that telephone equipment lease saved some money as well. Some achievements: we had 210 industry-recognized credentials awarded. We have 18 students enrolled in college courses and 35 more scheduled for this spring. We have 35 students currently enrolled in dual enrollment college classes. The next 2 bullets talk about individual student achievements, current and previous students. You'll see that there's 3 students that were elected to serve as the Vermont State Skills USA officers. And as Bob mentioned, we're just gearing up for Skills USA, so the information you see here, these great results for Skills USA are actually last year's results. We'll be able to update those with this year's results, which hopefully will be even better. Teachers, Beth Ladd was named the UVM Outstanding Teacher of the Year. We have 34 teachers enrolled in graduate level courses that are held right here at CTE for professional development. 30 faculty participated in professional development in the area of education technology. The Automotive Technology Program was reaccredited by the National Automotive Technicians Education Foundation. And we have teachers this year working with elementary school students in a science class. We have engineering and health informatics students that have been teaching topics such as human digestive system and evolutionary adaptations. As a school, CTE hosted the 17th annual Community Service Learning Days and served 160 senior citizens in the various areas. 23 students participated in the annual Women Can Do conference hosted by Vermont Tech. And then CTE held its first ever Girls Can Too Day, where we hosted about 40 middle school girls. The last bullet talks about the fact that we have 46 new and 10 returning members for the National Technical Honor Society. This slide shows the 6-semester average, and you can see after peaking in 11 and 12, we have this decrease that we're dealing with that causes a loss in revenues. But FY15 shows that we should be leveling off, and actually we hope to get back up to around the 400 FTE mark. But the good news is this seems to be the last year where we have a significant drop. And looking at 6-semester average in a different way, this shows you where the kids are coming from. And it was a little bit of a surprise to me. I didn't realize more kids come from MMU than from the high school. But Essex High School is the second largest contributor to 6-semester average. When you add in Milton, Colchester, and CVU, those 5 schools or towns make up 70% of the 6-semester average. In total, there's 27 schools or towns that attend CTE. CTE budget overview. Bob and his staff worked really hard to control costs, and you can see that because the budget is only going up $7,000, which is less than 0.1%. But the decreased 6-semester average still drives the need to increase tuition. And where the revenues come from for CTE, about 53% of the revenues come from the state. About 43% are local, and most of that is tuition from sending schools. There is one federal grant called the Carl Perkins Grant that accounts for about 4% of our money. Significant revenue changes. The fund balance is up about $25,000. As I mentioned in the high school, you're fortunate to have any kind of revenue roll forward. And we've increased the revenue a slight amount because we've used some of the committed fund balance. And that was to help offset that decrease in 6-semester average revenue. We still have about $19,000, which can guard against a major drop for FY15. Transportation fees are down a little bit because of the cancellation of the VYCC program and the transportation that goes along with that. Tuition, local tuition is up about 86. State tuition is down about 58. That's because we're charging more tuition, a higher rate, but on the state side we have a lower 6-semester average. So in total it's about $28,000 higher. Tuition reduction grant from the state is down about $23,000 because of the lower 6-semester average. Other restricted grants, this was a long-standing revenue item that we've had, and we've been phasing it out because we haven't really seen much in the way of this grant, these grants. So now we're down to about $10,000. So if we don't get any money, then we don't have a big risk there. The investments, About 75% is in personnel if you add the salaries, benefits, and shared service. Then you can see there are various other areas that we need to pay for, like utilities, debt service. And in the tech center on that side, we end up with about 8% that's left for supplies, books, travel, those kind of routine requirements that you have. This bar chart shows the major changes from FY13 to FY14. Obviously, salaries is the biggest difference. That's a 3.3% increase, but that includes staffing adjustments. As with the high school, having to absorb that 13% increase in health rates is a big challenge. The SU assessment is a bit higher for the reasons I mentioned earlier. Shared service is a bit higher, mostly driven by additional computer techs, which are high school employees. Debt service is down as it was with the high school. Technology is down because we have less high-end PCs to replace than we did this year. VYCC, I mentioned, is discontinued for FY14. Utilities is a bit higher, and as I mentioned, it's just an error. I was not charging CTE for their natural resources building. I didn't do that in 13. I've corrected that for 14. And under the other category, there's reductions in a lot of different areas, supplies, dues and fees, but those reductions are really in line with FY12 actual expenses. And to look at those significant changes in a little more detail, even though the increase is only $7,000, there's a lot of swings in either direction that make up that $7,000. We have a large increase in salaries and benefits. As I mentioned, salaries is up 3.3%, but it would only be 1.5 if it wasn't for the staffing adjustments that we need to make, and there'll be a slide showing those. Benefits is an increase of about $49,000. It would actually be a decrease if it wasn't for the large health rate hike. Professional services is down $150,000. About $100,000 of it is VYCC program. The rest of it is because we're able to pay a less amount for student certifications, still getting the same amount of certifications, just paying a lower amount. Shared service is up about $45,000. As I mentioned, a major driver there is the 2 additional computer technicians, which CTE pays a portion of. The SU assessment is up about $20,000, and I mentioned the reasons for the high school, same reasons here, web manager increase and decrease in fund balance for the SU. Director services is down about $13,000. It's in many areas, books, supplies, but once again, it's more in line with actual costs. I mentioned technology is down a little bit because we have less high-end PCs that we need to buy. Debt services is down. Most of that cost is for the One Campus project, and the interest decreases each year. Staffing adjustments, a little bit more of a demand in the area of co-ops, so there's a little bit of an increase there. Graphics, there's an increase for a second-year program, and there's a small increase for Intro to Medical Science course. And those 2 areas hopefully will lead to maybe a bit of an increase for 6-semester average. Transfer of duties is basically paying a little bit of a higher rate based on the body of work the individual's doing. Tax implications, we've talked about this before. CTE gets revenue from federal and state grants, from tuition and local revenues for some of their programs. The only implication as far as taxes go for Essex Town and Essex Junction residents is the amount that you see for tech tuition in the Essex High School budget. To summarize for CTE, the 6-semester average was the major challenge and led to a large decrease in revenues. We attempted to reduce costs to the maximum extent possible without impacting educational quality. But really, the increased health rates and the decreased 6-semester average were very hard to overcome without increasing tuition. One thing I should mention, in addition to that, the high school, CTE also met the challenge for change in FY12, and tech centers didn't need to. That makes it a little more difficult to kind of live within your tuition rate. The budget increase is only $7,000, or like I mentioned before, less than 0.1%. Tuition is increasing $700, but if you go back to where we were in FY9 and before Challenges for Change, we've only increased 5% in that span, which is 1% per year, which is very impressive. It may get lost a little bit because of the FY13 to 14 change, but looking at it in a bigger picture, it's very impressive. Just a quick look at what voters are going to see. They're going to see, for the high school, the two-vote language. It's going to show a paragraph saying what the total budget is. Part A will be the amount that we're below the threshold, and is also basically your general fund budget. Part B is the amount that you're over that threshold by, which equates to the FY14 column in your capital plan. There will be a capital fund article because that $228,000 needs to be transferred to the capital reserve, so there'll be an article talking about that. CTE's budget is a little under $8.5 million. And then just a reminder for everybody, the informational hearing will be on Monday, April 8th at 6:30. We go first. It'll be at the high school in the cafeteria. And the vote will be Tuesday, April 9th. And that is the budget.
Well done, Grant, thank you. You can take a break and get a glass of water, and thank you for your service to this board and putting and helping put a budget together to bring forward for the board to approve this evening. This is not new news to any of the board members here. We've had work sessions throughout the month of January looking forward to this, and I want to thank the board for your diligence in looking closely at these line items and making comments and providing guidance back to administration as to areas of concern and interest. And I think, you know, with all the factors that we have been dealing with here, you know, the charts that we saw at the beginning here on really the relatively small percent increases over time on these budgets, and given the constraints that we have with the financial constraints from the community, the quality of education that we give our students, and that's one thing we can't lose sight of, is that we are here for the students and making sure that they get the educational services they need to be successful, both for our technology center as well as for our high school. I think we've done a good job in capturing that going forward for FY14, and as I won't necessarily say summarized by Grant, but as outlined by Grant tonight, it's a lot of work, but I think it's a budget that I know, at least speaking for myself as a board member, I'd be proud to support and take forward as it goes to the community for a budget vote in April. So Grant, again, thank you very much for your work, and Dr. DeWeese for your staff support and services and helping construct this tonight. And do we have any other questions or comments from the board on that? Let me just go around. We'll go around this way. Ryan, you okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
This is an action item, so do we have a motion?
We haven't, I'm about to ask for a motion, but this is just kind of wrapping up any commentary you may want to add. Okay. Gary?
Our questions nicely done. Appreciate it.
That's good. Al?
Yeah, I just had a couple of thoughts. I really want to thank you for an excellent professional presentation here, and all of us, with no joke, you know, all joking set aside, this is a highly summarized presentation. It doesn't reflect a lot of the work to bring it to this more understandable level. I did have an opportunity this week to take a look at my employer's cost for health insurance, and it was at roughly $16,000 for a family of two. That's pretty concerning. But even more concerning, what seemed to be a monkey wrench in all of this year was the expected health increase of 4%, which is actually closer to 13%. And even though we're experiencing that this year, it's my understanding individuals will be seeing these increases in the near future as well. Now, since it's a double-digit increase and a very high unexpected increase at that, can you give us, or anyone here, give us an understanding from our insurance carrier's perspective as to what's driving these increases?
Yeah, actually, there's the slide here shows all the schools that I know of. I think all schools obtain their health insurance through the Vermont Education Health Initiative, which is a division of VSBIT. The rates, as you know, have been very good for several years. One year was, I think, even 0% in the recent past. They've averaged probably below 3% in the past 5 years, I think. But this year, VHI is actually recommending, or is actually recommending, a 14% rate increase. And this chart shows how they kind of came up with that. 12.8 was their proposed increase that they are going forward with. 6% of that is based on increased claims and administrative and reinsurance expenses. 1.2 is based on mandates and assessments, things that they have to cover that they didn't have to cover before. Mandates are new benefits that they have to cover, like I think autism was
Expanded
one
autism
area.
coverage, that's
Yeah.
right.
Assessments are state and federal fees that relate to healthcare reform initiatives. 5.6% relate to the reserves of VHI to try to restore their reserves because they've been tapping into that a little bit, and to pay for unanticipated cost claims. The remaining 1.2 to make up the 14% is because there are 2 federal assessments that have not been determined yet, so they were allowing for a little bit more there. Your board has gone with a rate increase of 13%, and that's based on the fact that the Department of Financial Regulation, instead of recommending 12.8 as the starting position, is recommending 9.5.
Okay.
The Green Mountain Care Board is the board that's going to ultimately set that rate, and that should be early February. So, best case scenario you might think would be 9.5 plus that 1.2, which would make it like 10.7. Worst case scenario could be 14%. So I think 13% is absolutely responsible as far as an assumption. Realize that in the area of health benefits, we make assumptions at the employee level too. We look at every employee and we make assumptions about which type of coverage each employee is going to need. So even if this percentage fluctuates a little bit, there could be other assumptions that might need to change as well. So overall, the number may not change even if the percentage comes down a little bit here.
We just need to be conservative on our number. The last question that I had on this was, I'm an Essex town resident, but I think the EJ voter on the CLA question is important.
Right.
So do we have any idea when a date for feedback from the state, when the CLA question will be answered?
I don't have a specific date, but it will be the state and actually the person who handles this is actually on the town side, but does it for the village. I've talked to that individual, and he knows and the state knows that this is an important factor that needs to be put into the budgets and needs to be reflected in the annual reports. So they do think that the answer is going to come out soon. Soon, I don't know what that means. I would hope that would mean within the next 2 to 3 weeks. I hope that we have the final CLA number before we finish the Essex Junction K-8 budget, which will just get started on Thursday night. So I'm hoping maybe a couple, 3 weeks we'll know.
Because I think that's important for the taxpayers in Essex Junction to know. And if the number, we believe the number is incorrect, then it should be corrected.
And I talked to to the individual at the town and told him I was using 100%. He said that was a reasonable number to use. He's actually hoping that it comes in at, I believe, somewhere more like 100.6 if the appeal is successful.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Al. Aaron, do you have any? Okay. So, questions and comments aside, now, Brian, I'll entertain a motion. In fact, I'll make a motion that this board approve a budget for the high school in the amount of $23,263,166 to be split up amongst the two articles that are there. One article being $23,035,049, which is the support of the to support the high school, and the $228,117, which is the remainder that we have determined necessary to support the high school for beginning on July 1st of 2013. So I'll make that motion. Just to simplify it very, very easily, a budget, Aaron, of $23,263,166.
You want to include CTE?
I'll do that as separately.
So, second.
Brian seconds. All in favor? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. For CTE, I'd like to make a motion that this board approves a budget of $8,459,355 necessary to support CTE for fiscal year beginning 1 July of 2013.
I'll second that.
Motion by Jack, second by Al. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 6-0. Thank you. So we approved this on the 21st day of January. I'll route this around. This is something that we all are signatories to, so it'll be, now that it's approved, we'll put it as part of the action. And so, Brant, we're good to go. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate the work.
Okay.
Thank you, Grant. Great
Yep.
work.
Yep.
So we've adopted, and I'm signing the annual warning here. We'll route that around. Next on the agenda for this evening is our consent agenda, which is the warrants, the meeting minutes of December 17th, January 7th, the 10th, and the 14th, and a recommendation to accept a professional appointment. Is there any consent agenda items we need to have pulled?
Have the warrants made their way around the table?
Thank you very much.
Okay. So, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Our consent agenda passed 6-0. Okay. What agenda items should be calendared for future board meetings? Oh,
Well, we talked about the math and science improvement plans and where we're at. We want to see the science, we don't have a science discussion.
yeah.
It's coming, and I've been kind of looking forward to the math piece of it too. I think longer term, the local assessment, there's a whole dialogue or discussion around local assessments, and in lieu of the kneecap phase out, if we have more local measurements of student results. But what that would include and how we would do it, we'll see, and TBD.
Okay.
I think we need to, we meet again in March, so we don't meet in February. So in March, we should have a discussion about our annual meeting.
Yep.
We should bring up the topic of staff appreciation so that we're ahead of that ball. We should be rounding out our discussion about budget communication. And it's never too early to see where the county superintendents are with the school calendar, to see if we might be making new progress with the school calendar. I'd also be interested if the board is as well. I think in March we'll have some early information on how the first time ever online registration for classes goes.
Mhm.
And it would be interesting just to have a kind of a sense of that fun and what some of the numbers look like.
Yep.
Okay. I would like to continue, have a follow-up to our discussion from the dialogue night for community safety that will happen on February 19th. And I would ask the board if there are specific safety, security questions, comments, and concerns, let's route them up through me. We can get them to administration, and we can include that as part of the
I'm going
March
to plan
meeting.
to make that meeting anyways.
Okay. Any other items that we want to consider?
The March time may be a good time to, if we don't have something real big in there, trying to just manage the clock, but hearing from our Roland Foundation fellow.
Okay.
Maybe a time to set board planning day.
Now you're just getting crazy.
Yeah.
I'm still thinking that summer's a long ways away. It's forever.
I see the need for having that discussion, Judy. My thought though is that might be more appropriate done after
Reorg.
reorg,
Or at reorg.
or at reorg, as the case may be.
Okay.
But I think it might be premature for March, but certainly after that March meeting to have that.
Great.
Was our plan to have something to present about the visioning at the April meeting? So do we need to discuss / meet about that prior? I mean, I think you said you were gonna talk. I mean, does the board need to meet about it? Should we incorporate that into our agenda? Or should that be something separate?
I think it's going to be a standing agenda item per the org notes now, right?
Correct.
Oh, good.
So we'll
Okay.
have it on the agenda, and then we'll use February as a time to get a little bit more
Okay.
grit in the paint.
Okay. Anything else? Dr. DeWeese, from you or your?
No, good meeting.
staff?
Appreciate the board's time and effort and support.
Yes. So I'd like to close the meeting tonight at 8:25, and thank you. Okay.